I am extremely honored and humbled to be here to introduce our guest today. I'd like to give you a little bit of background on what occurred in our DEA office in November. In June of last year, our Drug Enforcement Administration Administrator, Ann Milgram, put together a family summit. And this took place in Washington, D.C. And then she pushed out that every division in the United States do the same thing in their area. And so in November, we invited 10 families that lost a loved one to fentanyl poisoning to our DEA office in conjunction with law enforcement, the United States Attorney's Office, the District Attorney's Office, harm reduction groups, community groups, and educators. And this was a dual purpose event for us. It was an extremely heavy day, as you can imagine. And you see 3 beautiful faces on our screen right now. Everybody needs to remember the reason we're here is for them. The families have taken time out of their day and emotional stress that they're under to share their stories with you. The family summit, in my opinion, we had 2 goals here. One was to get all the law enforcement, harm reduction, and educators in the room to meet with the families, to see what we can do better, to see if our message is hitting the youth, to see what we missed with their family and their loved one, and what we can do better so that this doesn't happen to anybody else. The other thing that this provided were these families now have peer support. In talking to several of these families, one of the things that they didn't have was peer support. If they went to a grief counseling session, they were talking with other folks that lost a loved one to cancer or a car accident, and it didn't really hit the same metrics that they were trying to get support for. So it brought all of these families together so that they can support one another. The other thing it did was it made them available to the community groups for them to help us, for them to continue to get their story out to the public so that our citizens of San Diego County can understand that there's a problem and that they can help do something about it so that no other family has to go through this. These families showed amazing strength in sharing their experiences. One of the common themes was anxiety. Something that most of us think is not life-threatening. To these families, it was. So we asked these 10 families what we as law enforcement, community groups, and everybody in that room that day can do better. And we got some of the things. I'm just going to share a few of those things that we're working on and to let these families know that they were heard. The important thing that we're trying to do with 140 some odd people on this call today is what can you offer and what can you do to help continue to spread this message or to be a part of the solution, because all hands are on deck for this epidemic. One of them that came from one of the family members was that we don't have any billboards around the county expressing the dangers of fentanyl. So what we're doing is we're partnering with some local groups to get billboards up, bus wraps up, and we're trying to design different ads or sayings that can go, whether it's one pill can kill or Narcan, substance abuse treatment, that we can put on these billboards or bus wraps, because something different is going to reach somebody else independently, and not the same message is going to hit the right audience. The other thing is education for kids. District Attorney Summer Steffen's office and the County Office of Education are working on selecting evidence-based curriculums that schools will be able to use in the upcoming school year. These families are here because they don't want any other family to live through this pain. These families have been gracious enough to go to attend school functions and talk to kids. They're helping draft legislation, and they're involved in community presentations. I will get into this later, but we have to attack this from absolutely every angle. People don't want to hear from law enforcement. It is so much more impactful, as you will hear in a few seconds, on how these family stories will save lives. And that's why they're here. One of the things that we need your help, those of you that are listening, is one of the problems that we face is the access to affordable treatment for anxiety and depression. This is one of the more difficult issues for us to address. We are hoping that someone listening here out of the 140 people on this call have some creative solutions for us. So it is my honor to introduce three families that joined us in November for the Family Summit. First, I'd like to introduce you to Eric. Eric was hardworking, loved his family, and struggled with anxiety. His mom, Carrie, is here to tell his story for us today. Carrie?
Good morning. I want to thank everybody for being here today and allowing me to speak on Eric's behalf. As you mentioned a few things about Eric, I would also like to just mention a few things about him before I go into his struggles. Eric not only was the love of my life, but he was my son, and he was more than his struggles. And I just want that to be clear to everybody, that they realize that people that are struggling with addiction, they are more than their struggle. Eric played team sports his whole life, and he was an old soul. He was kind, but he had struggles. And during the time that he played team sports in high school, he was injured his sophomore year, and he was prescribed opiates. From that point on, he decided he didn't want to play team sports anymore. And as anybody knows who has children that play team sports, your life is wrapped up in practices, sports, and the kids don't have much free time for anything else. So after he decided after his sophomore year that he wasn't going to play any more sports, Eric had a bunch of free time. I'm not saying that the opiates that he was prescribed for that injury are where the addiction started at that point, but I believe that it was an opening for an experimental process for him. And because he didn't have all these other events in his life going on, he had to find new friends, because most of his friends were still all playing sports. So in the midst of finding new friends, his friends were doing things that he wasn't normally doing. And so Eric started to experiment. And sadly, he didn't have to go far to experiment, because the local drug dealer went to school with him, which is the case for many kids right now. Your local drug dealer is not the person that you see on the street. It's the person that's going to school with your kids. So we struggled for a bit, and by his senior year, we worked through the struggles, and it seemed like things were getting better. He started to do some bodybuilding, and the only problem with that too was he turned 18 his senior year. So it was a little harder to, I guess, put my thumb down on him for certain things, because at this point he was 18 and of course felt like he could do what he wanted to do, but he still had house rules and followed them. By the time he graduated high school, which is this picture that you see on the screen, this was the day of his high school graduation. I thought we had put most of the struggles behind us, and things were looking good. Shortly after that, he got injured during his bodybuilding phase, and he also moved out and was on his own living with friends. Well, he was prescribed opiates again. And this time there was nobody to monitor his opiate use, because he was 18, not living at home. And most parents now, once your child turns 18, you're pretty stifled on the things you can have your children do, or even I couldn't get his medical records or different things like that. The decline was pretty slow, but it started to be very obvious. And despite all the efforts that we tried, he was not willing to go to treatment and didn't want to seek help. Finally, by the time Eric was 21, which was in 2020, I was able to talk him into going into rehab. I'm not sure if he did it willingly, but I think he did it because it was finally time. 76 days in, I got a call and he said that he was going to go to sober living. And I was very ecstatic about that because, like I mentioned, Eric was more than his struggles with addiction. And so I was thinking we were going to have the Eric back that, you know, he had been his whole life. Well, mind you, during all this, we were in the midst of COVID also. So a lot of things during 2020 for people that were struggling with addiction were kind of put on the back burner because of the whole COVID situation. So again, 76 days in, I get the phone call from him saying that he was going to go to sober living after his 90 days was up, and that the facility had found him a job. Well, by day 86, I get a phone call from the facility. Eric had checked himself out and a girl picked him up, and that was June 5th, 2020. June 12th, 2020, he died from fentanyl poisoning. And we found him on June 13th. You know, I just want to be clear on this again, that people, this is not a, I'm sorry about my stuttering. This is not a problem for just those that are struggling with substance abuse. This fentanyl crisis is now affecting experimental users, one-time users, babies, literally babies, people that are struggling with addiction. And it is not a, it's not just a problem for those that think this could happen to them. We are past the if this is going to happen to your family, we're at the when it's going to happen to your family. And you're going to hear a lot of information today from all different groups and also from us parents that this has already happened to. And I ask you, please educate yourself and educate others, because that is the only way we are going to save people. And I don't want to see other parents become part of this club that I never asked to be a part of. I don't want to be in this club that I'm in now. It is heartbreaking every day when I have to hear about other people that are going through this or losing their loved ones. So I encourage you to not only educate yourself, but help educate others. Also, I believe every household should have Narcan and know how to use it. Whether you think this is going to happen to you or not, it is going to affect everybody that is human being at this point. This crisis is serious. Also know that if your kids are going to school, their drug dealers go to school with them. If your kids are on social media, they now can have the drugs sent directly to your mailbox, to your home, if they use social media. So this is a human problem. It is not just somebody that is struggling with addiction problem. There's also emojis that kids are using that are drug related, and the DEA does have them on their site, and you may think they're just rando emojis that you may not understand, but these are drug transactions that these kids are sending back and forth to other kids or other people to obtain drugs or sell them drugs. So I just encourage everybody to please educate yourself and educate others. And I didn't just mention that Eric was more than his struggles because he was my son. I mention that also because I know as a recovering addict, because I was more than my struggles. So I just appreciate everybody's time that they've given me today to speak. And I hope that, you know, people take this a little bit more seriously and realize this is an everybody problem and we need everybody's help. So I appreciate your time again, and thank you, Shelly.
Carrie, thank you very much for sharing your story. We really appreciate it. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Connor. Connor was only 17 years old when he died from taking half-baked pill. Connor was an athlete and extremely intelligent. He also struggled with anxiety. Connor's mom and dad, Matt and Laura, are here to tell you his story. Matt?
Good morning. Connor was a California kid. He did all things California kids would do. He loved the outdoors. He surfed, skied, played every sport while growing up. He explored Yosemite, Sequoia, Kings Canyon, and the Redwoods. He liked to fish offshore with his uncle. It doesn't get more California than that. Connor was also a dedicated student. His work ethic carried him through. At Cathedral Catholic, he was better than a 4.0 student, taking advanced placement classes. He was a member of the football team, which is a year-round commitment. He was all in on life. As a California kid, Connor also had to deal with California problems, namely an ever-increasing permissive stance on drugs in the state of California. Connor was first exposed to synthetic marijuana when he was 14. A friend's older brother legally purchased vape products, which he tried. He liked it. This would begin his struggles with addiction and his curiosity of all things drug related. As a parent, you never want your child to start down the path. California's lax drug enforcement and Snapchat made it very easy for him to continue to purchase drugs. Add to that social anxiety, overbearing COVID isolation restrictions, and a wide open border for fentanyl trafficking, and it was a recipe for disaster. On the evening of May 4th, 2021, Connor snuck out of the house and went to his friend / drug dealer's house. He purchased a blue Percocet. He was getting ready for school when I left the morning of May 5th. When he didn't show up in my classroom that morning, I knew something was wrong. I hurried home and he was passed out, unresponsive on the bathroom floor. I called 911 and started CPR. The paramedics arrived soon after and tried valiantly to revive him. It was too late. The blue Percocet was laced with enough fentanyl to kill him 3 times. He never knew what hit him. I relive this scenario every day. He did not overdose. He was poisoned. I'm going to turn it over to Laura right now.
Thanks, Matt. To reiterate what Matt mentioned, Connor, he was a typical teenager, and he really he loved life. So, in addition to all the wonderful things about Connor, though, he did struggle with anxiety, and it seems to be a common theme where the need to deal with these teenage struggles and challenges like anxiety and depression, our kids seek help. Matt and I were seeking help for Connor when we realized he had this anxiety, but unfortunately, this drug dealer, as Matt mentioned, got to our child first. And with Connor's anxiety, he was an easy target for these drug dealers. And with the easy access, this makes this day and age really tough for parents to get in front of it. Another thing, just to reiterate, as Matt mentioned, Connor did not overdose on a handful of pills. That morning, May 5th, he overdosed on one pill that killed him. That was that contained fentanyl. Unfortunately, I think that we're dealing with an issue that's killing children every day. And I think there's a point that we would really need to do something about it. So I appreciate these types of meetings, and I hope what we're sharing with you today is going to make a difference. In closing, losing my son has been devastating, and I know that I can't bring him back, but I'm hoping sharing Connor's story emphasizes how serious this is and that we need to take action. Thank you again. Shelly, back to you.
Man, Laura, thank you very much. Lastly, I'd like to introduce you to Jake. As you can tell, Jake was an athlete. I remember Jake's dad, Dave, talking about how challenging life has been since Jake's poisoning and overdose, and how he didn't want anyone else to live through this. The resounding same message that every single family on this call feels. Jake's parents, Dave and Rita, are here today to tell Jake's story. Dave?
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity for this platform and for the people that want to be educated. As any parent will say, they have good days and bad days after going through this. And I'll tell you right now, today is not a good day for me. So I'm gonna do the best I can. My wife, I know, will speak up as well and talk about our son. My son Jake passed away on October 30th, 2018. It feels like it just happened 3 hours ago. The pain has not gotten any better. The tears come down your face and it feels like your tear ducts are broken. As I'm talking to you now, I have tears coming down my face, just seeing my son's face on the screen and listening to his name. It's one of those things that just never stops. It's when you're find out that you're going to have a child and the doctor says whether it's a boy or girl or whatever else happens when the baby's born, and for that second on, you can't imagine taking another breath without that child in your life. And for us to know we don't have our son has been devastating for us. Jake was a great kid, and when you look at him in this picture, that picture basically shows what Jake was. Jake was a really big kid. I mean, he was a big boy. He was at 14, 15 years old. He was 6'3", about 300 pounds. He wanted to be an NFL lineman. He had big dreams. He was a very good baseball player, and things just came easy to Jake. Like Jake would tell you, hey, I'm going to hit a home run right now. And he would. Jake could do almost anything he wanted. He was extremely strong and he was funny and actually had dreams of becoming a stand-up comedian. But he was a great son. He was a great brother. He was a great friend. Everyone will say how loyal he was to him. One of the things we've heard since Jake passed was kids in school said Jake was always there for me. I was the kid that used to get picked on, and then when people would find out I was friends with Jake, nobody would ever bother me because Jake was such an opposing figure. But he was loving. His heart was big, and what you saw on the outside of Jake wasn't what was going on the inside. Jake suffered through depression and he suffered through anxiety, and he made a couple attempts even at suicide. And if you would have told me years ago when Jake was 15 or 16 years old that Jake was going to die from suicide, I don't think it would have surprised us. The fact that Jake, who passed away at age 20, from 19 to 20 years old, he was winning at the end of his life. Jake had spent a ton of time talking to people and making videos about depression and what he went through and how you need to talk to somebody and it's okay to reach out. And he was speaking in front of thousands of people in a speaking engagement set up for suicide walks to talk to people that battled anxiety and depression. Jake had an addiction to marijuana is where it started, and then it went to Xanax, and then he was doing really well, and he wasn't, involved in Xanax or any of that stuff in the last year of his life. And he was doing fantastic. He was coaching 14-year-old boys and trying to help them get on the path that him and so many of his friends had to earn scholarships to change their lives forever. And he made a huge impact on the community. And then Jake all of a sudden one day went through that bad day of depression. And Jake reached out and said to a friend of his, hey, do you know anyone that can get me a Xanax? I'm having trouble falling asleep. And the person who Jake had never met before, who came to the house to give him a Xanax pill, instead gave him a pill that was basically laced with fentanyl on it. My last conversation with Jake was October 29th, 9:30. I was standing in the hallway in his doorway. He was on his bed playing video games, talking to 5 of his friends. And we talked about depression. He said, Dad, I'm going to the doctor tomorrow. I'm going to make an appointment. I know I'm not 100%. I'm going to the doctor and we'll get straightened out. And then he said, I love you, Dad. Told him I loved him back. Walked down the hallway, went to sleep. And we never talked to Jake again. While playing video games, Jake's heart stopped. And as I said before, Jake was a big guy. Jake at that time, again, he's over 6'3", but he had been into working out and getting his body into shape and getting his head into shape. And he looked fantastic. And as big as Jake was at, let's say 6'3", 280, Jake died from one speck of fentanyl on a pill. And that was it. And if it can take someone the size of Jake that fast, it could definitely take your child as well. As you've heard, none of us want anyone part of this club. It's the worst club to be in. The emotion of crying is awful. The heartbreak of losing your child feels like life's never going to be the same. I'll tell you though, the worst part for me as a husband is when I go to sleep at night and I lay down and I can hear my wife next to me crying in her sleep, and know that she's suffering because she misses her boy is a nightmare. And it is something that is extremely serious. And as so many other problems we have in this country, it seems like we forgot about putting children first, and we can't have this keep happening over and over. The news reports continue to get worse and worse, and we need to figure out a way to change things and change them as fast as we can. It needs to be extremely important. And just going back to last week, the Super Bowl was last week, and I heard the Super Bowl ads were $7.5 million for a 30-second ad. And you're going, there's be nothing more important than one of these ads that talked about the dangers of fentanyl and saving a child's life. But yet, that all of a sudden that kind of money across the country just seems like it's too much to waste on our children. It's frustrating. And I just think with what we're doing today, I hope we're taking a huge step in the right direction. I'm gonna hand it over to my wife, Dr. Rita Palais.
Good morning, everyone. I have this opportunity to speak to you, but unfortunately I'm the last parent, and having to hear everyone today just is heartbreaking, because with every story just opens that wound that you try to deal with on a daily basis. After so many years, it's going on 4 years. It's 4 years for Jake, and as David said, it's like yesterday. And so you don't forget your child, you just learn how to live without them, and that's a struggle every day. Dave shared who Jake was and what Jake was all about, and it's such a good friend to others. I just want to share with you, as an educator for over about 27 years now, and I'm actually at the County Office of Education, so now I support across the county. And I just want to share with you, the day I lost Jake, I was at work, and how your child's routine and their structure of what they do on a day-to-day basis. And Jake, as you can see, and Dave saying he liked to eat. He was a good cook too. And he used to call me in the day and say, hey, Mom, you want me to start something? If he wasn't working, Mom, you want me to start something for dinner? And I hadn't heard from Jake that day. And it was odd. And I was on my way home from work, and I called my son, Josh, my oldest son, and I said, I've been trying to call your brother and he's not answering. Have you heard from your brother today? And he said, no, Mom. When Dad and I came home to go to practice, for baseball, as they were all coaching together, he said Jake was taking a nap, so we didn't bother him. He had work, we didn't bother him. So I went to go work out and Dad went to practice. I said, okay, called Dave. He was at practice and same thing, he hadn't talked to Jake. Well, mother's intuition, I knew something was wrong. As Dave said, Jake was doing really well, but I just knew something was wrong. He was still suffering from anxiety, he's still suffering from depression. One thing that I want to share with all of you is our mental health of our children is so important, and we don't have enough counseling. We don't have enough access to counseling. Every time I tried to make an appointment, we have health insurance. It would take weeks for him to get into his appointments. They would do group sessions. Group sessions weren't good. When he would go to outside group sessions, he would come back and tell me, Mom, I just want you to know there's drug dealers outside of our group sessions. So that was dangerous. The fact that he was suffering from anxiety and depression, and my husband and I couldn't find a support system to help him, was tough. And so Jake, on that day, as Dave said the night before, reached out easily on social media and got access to one pill. As I continue my story, and I know that something was going on with Jake, I come home. I had a mother's thought, and our dog came running to me, and I dropped all my bags, went running upstairs, and I found my son in his room, blue. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing, that my son was gone. I couldn't do anything about it. Seeing my son there, my beautiful son, my baby, and he was gone. I will never have that vision out of my head. And I can't, at night, you can't even think about your child, because those visions, those thoughts, those what should I have done, what could I have done, what can others do, is a horrible vicious cycle that plays over and over in your head. Since then, my husband and I have tried to do all we could to help others and get the information out. And as I mentioned, as an educator, there's 3 things I want to share with you. Fentanyl is extremely accessible. It's easy to get it on social media. It's all around us. Signage about drugs for our children is not enough. I mentioned I've been in education for a very long time. They need to understand what one pill can do and how it could take your life. And if it doesn't take your life, the damages it can do. Jake has had friends who have taken fentanyl and has been, their parents got to them in time, but now are either mentally challenged, have lost appendages, have lost legs, have lost arms, are not fully there even after being revived from taking fentanyl. So the fact is, it's so accessible to our children. They need to understand how dangerous it is so they don't even touch it, and how so many other things are laced with fentanyl and how inexpensive it is to access it. So between that and the fact that our services and our social services that we need for those children who struggle with anxiety and depression are not accessible. So we have a drug that's accessible, but social services that are not accessible to our children when it comes to helping with anxiety and depression. So what do? They self-medicate, and they go out and find something to help the pain. And they typically go to their friends and not to their parents. So with that, I hope our message as parents shares with you not only the pain that we deal with on a daily basis, but I hope that we are not getting desensitized, because there's so many children, teenagers, and young adults passing away that we just keep hearing the story on the news, and I'm afraid we're going to get desensitized to it, that it's, oh, just another child has died from fentanyl, just another one, just another one. With that, I thank you for hearing my story and the cry out for action. With that, I pass it back to Shelly. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave and Rita. I have heard these stories several times, and I still fight back the tears. And I know that of the 140 some people on this call, you are doing the same. You do what most parents do, right? You put your kid's face on these beautiful kids' face. These parents, Carrie, Laura and Matt, Dave and Rita, are here because they don't want us to live their nightmare. They have the strength and the courage to continue to come forward, to continue to push their stories and talk about this so that the rest of us on this call don't suffer. Thank you, families, for coming forward and continuing to share your story. We know we are not going to arrest our way out of this problem. That's why we need your help. Kids do not want to hear from law enforcement. They want to hear from the surviving siblings and cousins and parents and grandparents, the people that have the life experience of survival and dealing with this tragedy. These families are here putting themselves on the line and making themselves vulnerable so other kids stay alive and to prevent other families from living their nightmare. I beg the 140 people on this call to talk about it. I have often said I don't feel that the San Diego County residents and community understand the magnitude of this problem until it happens to them. You heard these families say they thought it would never happen to them, and here they are. If you continue to talk about this real problem, this real epidemic, maybe you hit somebody that is facing a challenge but hasn't yet taken that one poisonous pill. I'm sure you have connected with one or all of these stories. And if you have, please reach out to Marla or one of the families. Their information will be available in the chat. They are here so that they can help every child out there and every family avoid dealing with what they're dealing with. However they can help, you can clearly see their vulnerability. You can clearly see the passion and emotion behind every word they say. And thank you to all of you for taking the time to talk to us, because reliving this can't be easy for you, even when you're trying to struggle through life on a daily basis. So on behalf of everyone on this call, I want to thank the families for their courage and strength in continuing to fight this horrible epidemic. Your continued efforts are saving lives.
I'm Lieutenant Jeff Ford with the Sheriff's Department. I'm stationed out of the Vista Station, and I will be letting you know about a program that we started recently as December. We're calling it the Naloxone Leave Behind Program. And what we've done is we have partnered with HHSA to help get naloxone out to the public, especially for at-risk individuals. What we're trying to do is anyone who either comes to the station or that deputies will come across in the field who they believe are at risk or know someone who is at risk, the deputies can either give out a harm reduction kit, or if the people come into the station, we will hand out a harm reduction kit per request with no questions asked. And what that harm reduction kit is it's a box of naloxone, which has 2 doses of naloxone in it. Along with the naloxone, we hand out a pamphlet, which basically it's a resource pamphlet and information pamphlet to help educate the public in one, about the drug itself, two, resources that they can reach out to get help with an addiction issue if they do have one. Three, how to reach out to emergency services when they need it, and what to look for as far as an opiate overdose, the effects of it, how to administer the naloxone itself in case of someone is suffering from an overdose at that time. And we've included a QRC code in the corner for anyone who's interested can scan that with their phone and watch an entire video so they can be prepared in the event of an overdose and they can administer the naloxone. We have currently, as of, I believe yesterday, we've handed out about 400 of these kits so far. And we've received positive feedback from the community. We're hoping we can continue this partnership and make our community safer and help reduce our overdose deaths within the community.